What did we do differently on Iridium? An interesting, kind of an interesting highlight is during the peak of my satellite factory here in Arizona, a satellite came off my production line one every 4.8 calendar days. So our first launch was May of '97. We were launching out of Vandenberg Air Force Base, out of Baikonur, Kazakhstan on the Russian launch vehicle, and out of Taiyuan on the Chinese Long March 2C. So I had 3 launch teams simultaneously launching out of 3 continents. I had a factory that was cranking out satellites at the rate of one every 4.8 calendar days. And the interesting thing is that for a period of time, Arizona was the leader in the space business. For that period of time, from the beginning of '97 through '98, 2 years, Arizona produced more satellites than the rest of the world's satellite factories combined. We used, on my project, we used 40% of the world's lift capability to get the satellites up. So for 2 years, the center of the space business of the whole world was right here in Arizona. And of course, we've kind of lost all of that now, unfortunately. So how did that all happen, right? In the military, I ran these large programs in the military. And a typical, so I ran a lot of satellite programs. The military government approach, and the military satellites are built in the same methodology as NASA satellites. So I would say U.S. government satellites are built similar to European. I have had a lot of experience with the European satellite houses. The two main houses here in the U.S. today are Boeing and Lockheed Martin are the 2 primary suppliers of satellites. And in Europe, it's Astrium and Thales, so the 2 big players in Europe. And we've had a whole series of mergers and combination, but in general, the European and the U.S., they're all based on a government methodology. And I would say that the U.S. satellite houses are low quality, high cost satellite houses. The way you get satellites in orbit for extended life is you test and you test and you test and you test. But the government way of procuring satellites is low quality, high cost. And perhaps Danny is the blame for that, right? Maybe it's really my fault that because I spent 12 years in that environment. But the government procures, the government methodology is cost plus contracting. And the way the big contractors get paid are on cost plus contracts. So the only way aerospace companies can make more money is to extend the schedule, is to put more people on, because they're paid by man hours and the number of people, and then you're given a profit on top of the man hours you expend. So you can't, there's no way, the only way to make more money is to put more people on for longer periods of time. You either take the same amount of people and work longer, or you add more people. And so the contract, the way the U.S. And the Europeans do it is the suppliers are motivated to not do high quality work, to extend the schedule, to do changes on the contract. And so I've had, to give you an example, I had one experience at Lockheed Sunnyvale, where Lockheed had a major subcontract for me on one of my big satellites, and I couldn't, and they were building the power subsystem, and I couldn't get the power subsystem out of the Lockheed Sunnyvale plant. I finally had to get 50 of my prime contractors, engineers in, and we drug the power system out of the Lockheed plant. So, so all of this is relevant for my discussion on doing things differently in Iridium. So the heritage that I'm dealing with when we started the Iridium project was all the suppliers in the U.S. have what I call low quality, high cost satellite factories and high cycle times. And typically, final assembly and test of a satellite takes 9 months to a year. Now in Iridium, I built 100 satellites. I think it was, the last tail number was 99 or something like that. So we built 100 satellites. So if you would take 9 months times 100, I mean, I wouldn't live that long to execute Iridium, right? And so it was clear from the beginning that we had to do things differently on Iridium. Now, when I came to work for Motorola, I was lucky in that I worked for, the corporate executive was Durrell Hillis, and I'd known Durrell Hillis a long time. The advantage I had with Durrell Hillis was he was my executive who I bought government payloads from for these big satellite companies. So he understood the procurement methodology and the government approach. However, he was a senior Motorolan who was steeped in Motorola's commercial processes. So in the 80s, I would say Motorola was in the late 70s and 80s. Motorola had to become vicious on quality in order to compete with the Japanese in the electronics in order to survive. And so Durrell was steeped in the best Motorola commercial manufacturing processes at the time. So when I sat down with Durrell, then we said we have to figure out a way to do things differently on Iridium, and it has to be done with commercial best practices, high quality, available, and Motorola had it at the time. Today, if I was going to look at high quality commercial processes, I'd probably go to Intel. So I'd go to Intel and go to their plants. But at that time, Motorola was one of the leaders in best commercial practices. We had, one of the first things that I did was Durrell sent me to Motorola's school for commercial program execution. So I took Motorola's latest design for manufacturability, design for quality. I took all of Motorola's commercial stuff. And as a matter of fact, I actually took the courses twice because my fear in running Iridium was that I would lapse into my old way of doing business. Here I was in charge of revolutionizing the manufacturing of space hardware, right? And I was a leader in the old low quality, high cycle time, worthless way of government procurement of satellites. So I actually took the course twice because my fear is I would grab my security blanket of the old way of doing business. So we selected, in the first quarter of 1991, I selected Lockheed as my partner to build a bus on Iridium, and I selected Raytheon as my partner to build a phased array, and Motorola built the comm electronics payload. So there's 3 pieces on the Iridium satellite, and you can see right here are the phased array. There were 3 phased arrays built by Raytheon. Lockheed built all the structures, the power subsystem, and all the bus. And then the comm electronics payload on the inside, all the processors, we did it ourselves.